Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys doing fantastic. Listen, today we're talking about Zbeck, right? The Zbeck network, our beloved Zbeck. So, ladies and gentlemen, we can see that we have pretty much hit around 0.0059 before we started to sell off. We can actually see if we go to the monthly candle, right? We officially closed at 0.005, which is not bad. Very, very solid indeed. Now, I do want to say that I do believe there's going to be two scenarios coming from this, right? Number one, ladies and gentlemen, right? First scenario is that we're going to have something similar to this where we had a nice blue candle, then we have a sell off, right? Just like we did in June. And then April was a little bit, small, just kind of the way it was in July. And then in May, it pumped and how it could possibly be in August. Okay, how it could possibly be in August. Now, for me, ladies and gentlemen, right, that is scenario one. Scenario two is going to be something similar, but it just takes a little bit longer to play out. Scenario two is where this is going to be the ultimate retest month, right? You can see, ladies and gentlemen, that we do have this high here and we do have a lower high here. Okay. But we can also see we have this very, very nice bottom over here, this black candle. So, right, the most important thing now to happen is even if we don't move a lot in August, it is important to close above 0.0034 ultimately, right? So if we were to close above somewhere here, boom, let's just say we close at this rectangular box, then there's a very high probability that starting September is when we would actually get those serious gains. Now, for me, those are the two main scenarios. I don't really see Zebec selling off, going back down to very, very low levels. I would be extremely surprised if that were the case. We can see, ladies and gentlemen, that something like Bitcoin sold off a couple of $1,000 over the last like 2 days, let's say, right? Over the last 2 days, it's gone from 119,000 practically to 113,000 at one point, roughly 5%. And we go and look at something like Zbeck, right? Zebec in the last 2 days, boom, has sold off 21%. So a big drop, right? A big drop. But ladies and gentlemen, you got to remember that we did practically sweep very key areas. When we go to something like the daily candles, right? We swept this, which we were talking about how this may be the start of a possible reversal, right? Nothing too crazy, but you got to remember that these types of moves and likes the upside eventually run out of gas and eventually they start selling off just a little bit, kind of like the way we're over here, right? Something very similar where we were just kind of going strictly up, right? We were retesting, but then eventually, before we actually had a big explosion, we started to sell off a little bit and go sideways and diagonally too, right? You can see, right? Very nicely. Draw this up. So we're going up and down, but still very up. And then we were preparing. And then again, we started to move up. So something similar could play out. And there's a high probability, which is what I'm betting on, right? It would not surprise me if Zbeck Network starts to kind of go sideways and sell off slowly for the next week or two, right? That would be my main thing that I think is going to happen, where we kind of go in a diagonal channel once again, but it is just in preparation to pump much higher. Okay. That is ultimately it, right? That's why I'm not scared of pullbacks. I know a lot of people get really emotional over pullbacks and they're like, no, like this is bad, this and this is going to happen. But ladies and gentlemen, it is just part of the game. It is just part of the game. Okay. You gotta remember, you also made it this far. You also made it this far in a cycle, and we are much more closer to victory than we are further away. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, but we are above a key zone, right? We are above a massive support, the biggest, most relevant support we have for Zbeck Network. So I would be really surprised if we would ever come back below this zone. Like for me, that is a no-go. That is not going to happen. Right? Can we retest off this zone one more time in August? Yes, we very well can. Right, but it would look probably something like this for the most part, where we kind of just zigzag, may have a little bit of life at one point, and then just kind of do something like this before we then find momentum once again to the upside, kind of like this, kind of like just the same way we had over here. Okay. So This is what I expect. I kind of expect the correction phase to be happening for Zebec. We've actually been seeing a lot of altcoins get some type of correction phase. One coin that I cover a lot on this channel, as you guys know, is Turbo, right? I cover Turbo a lot, and we can see that Turbo had a huge pump on the 14th, but ever since then, it's been slowly but fundamentally correcting. Now, I do expect Turbo to have a bounce back, right? But why I'm showing you this is because I expect Zebec to kind of have this diagonal channel like this, kind of like Turbo does. So, you know, it might be slow. It might be slow the next couple of days, the next couple of few short weeks, but it's still good. We are still trending to the upside because when we look at something like this chart, ladies and gentlemen, even though at this current moment, we are selling off, we are kind of just in this accumulation zone for altcoins, right? We're kind of just going sideways, diagonally up. And even if we pull back lower, as long as we close above certain areas, it would still indicate that we are still bullish, right? But look, it's good, right? It is good. We are ultimately still kind of moving sideways, right? So it's not going to be the craziest of times. There might be a little bit up, a little bit down, but this is just all preparation for because leaving, once we start leaving this huge zone, all coins are going to explode. Zbec's going to explode. That is just the reality, right? When the money starts going from Bitcoin and Ethereum and XRP into our coins like Zbec, you guys are going to see insane gains. You have to remember, Zbec's what? At a couple 100 million market cap at best, right? And, you know, getting to a couple billion market cap, yeah, it requires definitely some money, right? It definitely requires some money, but like, let's not pretend is the hardest thing in the world to move, right? It's currently at 428 million market cap, very, very respectable, right? Almost a top 100 coin, 128th in the world. But even if we got like 1% of Bitcoin's money, or like, what I'm saying, just all that money starting to come back down into altcoins. And you got to remember, not all the altcoins literally pump at the same time, right? So they kind of cycle. So imagine a big chunk of that money going to Zbeck. Like this thing can go to billions of market cap easily, easily. That is why I'm not worried. I'm looking at the big picture, ladies and gentlemen. Do not be scared of pullbacks. Do not be scared of anything like this. You know, this is just part of the adventure, right? This is just part of the adventure. I know people are saying no, altcoin season's not going to happen, blah, 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 blah. But like I said, we are consistently raising the floor, right? For altcoins, we're consistently raising the floor on the monthly. We're in a diagonal channel. And once we start breaking out, there is no going back. And altcoins are going to be the most rewarding thing ever. But that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you guys think about Zbeck. Do you guys still have it? Are you looking to be buying more? Because I know some people are saying, it's time to buy more. It's time to double down. Some people are saying, I'm scared. So I want to know what you guys think. But I love you guys so much. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.